Welcome back. Final episode. It's like episode 6, I think. We're back for the Hankworx marathon. This time we are playing The Caretaker. My name is Fia Gloss, by the way. This one, well, let's just go through it bit by bit here. A dark, twisted, morbid, psychological, amoral, material, visual, atmospheric short story about a cemetery caretaker and her struggles contains some disturbing content and visuals. Made in a limited amount of time during the Scream Season Jam. Original inspiration for the story, and there's actually a link to a news article about the sort of the impetus for this story being written. I won't go through this entire article here, but suffice it to say, a lot of the elements of the story that we're about to read is actually drawn from this news article, this true story. So if you ever, so when I initially played it the first time, I felt like, this story is like just almost too morbid and too dark. Like it almost is like going over that line where it's like it just doesn't feel real anymore, where it's like almost like a parody or something like that. It's a feeling I get with a movie like Requiem for a Dream, where it's like there's no hope for any of these characters whatsoever. Everything's awful. Everything's terrible. Everyone dies or whatever, spoilers. They don't all die. I'm just saying spoilers, that bad things happen on a movie that came out like 15 years ago or whatever. But it's like watching that movie, it's like I disconnect from it completely because it's just kind of like, what's even the point of all this? So anyway, Scream Season was a jam. I'm going to do my shameless plug for the Scream Jams here, so skip ahead if you don't want to listen to this. Scream Season, the theme of Scream Season was chill. Make a game resembling the cold season, the spooky feeling you get shivering up your spine, or just a plain chilled out game. This was around, December 7th to December 17th of last year. There was 18 entries. It was, a lot of good fun. I also entered into this, by the way. So also a shameless plug for me. Oops. Meant to go back. So Caretaker got 8th overall, which I think is a shame. Personally, I think it was very good, and I feel like it fit the theme better than these scores reflect. I'm going to openly disagree with the scores here and say everybody's a fraud and they don't know what they're talking about. I thought The Caretaker was an extremely strong entry. But this was the first game that I ever played by Hankworx, and so let's all go through it together and read the story, and I'll share some thoughts, but they probably won't be too dissimilar from the things I've already said about it on its entry page. But who knows, maybe a second go around it'll feel a little different. So this story contains harsh language and dark subject matter, and just again, this is kind of this like characteristic look and sound and feel of Hankworx. Like, I guess because it's the first one I ever played, it's like this is what I associate with Hankworx, but this is just how it feels, like this is what I think of when I think of a Hankworx game. I've been the caretaker here since my dad died. That was over 30 years ago. He's buried here somewhere. That was the first grave I'd ever dug. I don't remember where it is. My father had a lot of pride for the work he did here. He always told me it was God's work. I never understood what he meant. He was so happy in his dead-end life. I always told myself I wouldn't fall into the same trap, but here I am. I never got the big deal. I never will. This place has been nothing but a burden to me. It's impossible to turn a profit. It costs more in upkeep every year. All of our equipment is busted. On top of it all, I don't care. The dead don't need to be tended to. We've all just been convinced they do. There's one thing I've taken away from this job. I've discovered the undeniable fact of existence. Everybody dies. What happens after that? Well, that depends on who you hand them over to. I typically don't come out here unless there's a grave opening. It's not worth the trip unless there's a check involved. It hurts my arms getting up here on my own. The tractor never starts anymore. Today, my trip is a bit of a special circumstance. I've received some letters through certified mail last week. Usually my mail goes straight into the garbage. It has for 20-something years. There's nothing good about the mail. These letters had also found their way to the trash until the third one came last Friday. There was something foreboding about the third envelope. It was heavier, somewhat misshapen, seemed to have a noticeable presence in the room. I had originally thrown it in the trash. 10 or so minutes later, I found myself thinking about it. The drink in my hand didn't distract me enough. I found myself at the fridge to retrieve another when I looked into the garbage and I saw the bulging envelope face up. I was fairly certain it moved since I put it there. I set the envelope down on the table and poured another glass. I ran a finger over the small hump in the envelope. It was a thin object, 6 or 7 inches long, with 2 dull points at each end. It wobbled the envelope back and forth on the dull points. I finished another drink. I found this in the road. They're scattered all over your cemetery. You're going to burn. I wasn't sure exactly what kind, but the envelope contained a human bone. My guess was something forearm related. That made sense, I thought to myself. I've had to move plenty around myself to make room for new graves. What didn't make sense was someone snooping around and sending threatening letters. The letter writer was likely to have called the police already, I figured. They probably wouldn't be in too much of a rush to get here. There should be time to clean up. How bad could it be? A garbage bag or two, and it's like it never happened. Well, officer, I don't know how anyone could have accused me of such neglect. I'd have to convince Hank to come out and clear off the banks I couldn't reach, which was the most discouraging necessity of my predicament. He knows I can only get through the flat sections here, but that doesn't mean he wouldn't make me pay for it. I thought maybe if Bobby came out for supper, I could get him to do it for me. Hank didn't need to know about this. I had figured out a fairly efficient method for traveling down a row and picking up the visible bone fragments that were close enough that I could reach. After a dozen or so headstones, the load in my left hand noticeably increased in weight. The black contractor bag no longer blew in the breeze. I heard a crack underneath me, and I instantly lost my motivation. The task was insurmountable, especially in my condition. There was no way I could cover this whole place by myself. After almost a half hour, I didn't even cover 100th of the graves, and my 50-gallon bag was about half full. I decided the most logical thing I could do was to cover the 5 or 6 rows closest to the road. Hank wasn't going to be happy about this. I thought he was bad when I got my DUI. This could end up in the papers, front page this time. His name soiled. No one to blame but the man who left his handicapped wife alone as the caretaker of the cemetery while he went to Texas on a fracking crew. I could just see the headlines. I shuddered as I thought of him coming home in the afternoon. Maybe if I made him his favorite dinner, he wouldn't notice anything else. Maybe if I did, he would realize I was hiding something. I had to stop thinking about it. Chicken and corn, that's for dinner. I tried to focus on the task at hand instead of my thoughts. I needed another bag by the end of the second row. "Excuse me, miss." Before me, out of nowhere, stood a beautiful red-headed dream of a woman. She wore a short black dress, and her recently shaved legs seemed to demand my attention. I imagined the look she must get, just like I did a long time ago. Her cheeks were so red and full of life, it made me sick. "Do you, work here? I'm Leela Carpenter. I'm looking for my grandfather." So, we'll go with, who is he? He's dead. He died in the war before I was born. I never got the chance to meet him. I'd never been to his grave. My father told me he was buried here, William Carpenter. So, we'll go with, sorry, honey, there's so many Carpenters here. Okay, well, I'm going to look around for a bit longer if you don't mind. I'll leave you be. Have a nice day. Fucking harlot. Fucking harlot. What the hell was she doing here, dressed like that? I was more angry at her parents for allowing her to become the woman she was. How could she expect to find a decent man showing off that much flesh? There's only one kind of man that attracts. I thought of how to teach her a lesson. I wished I had an open hole. I imagined her head being flattened like a pancake under the weight of one of the tractor tires. It was a shame I couldn't get it started on my own. Hank would be a little more creative. His desires, pleasures, and fetishes were different than mine. He'd probably want to keep her all to himself, like he's done to so many in the past. He always kept them a secret from me, but I always found them and took care of them myself. He thought because I couldn't get into the basement that I would never find out. But I knew how his cameras worked. Bobby always helped. I made those harlots scream louder than Hank ever did. They never imagined they could feel the way I made them feel. Let me just pause here and say, like, in the original story, there was nothing necessarily about a murderous couple or anything. That is definitely added. I kind of said before that it was based on that, but this is added. And I think at this point you can kind of see how it definitely has this really dark, depressing thing going on. That's almost too like, this is where I feel like it's just almost too much. And if I were writing this personally, I wouldn't take it as far as this. And I feel like to some extent this detracts from sort of the horror alone of a neglected graveyard in a way. That's just my personal feeling. And I said as much when I was doing the review the original time. So anyway, we'll continue on here. There was one in particular I don't think I could ever forget. Hank called her Cherry. She always begged for more. It was so obvious why Hank liked her. She stayed in the basement for almost a year. Unlike all the others before and after her, she knew she deserved what she was getting. She was the only one who didn't stay chained up. She liked learning the lessons. There wasn't anything big enough, sharp enough, or blunt enough. I was always jealous of her. All the others always sounded drenched in the misery. You could hear their longing for freedom in the tones of their wailing and screaming. Cherry was different. She liked it there. That was her downfall. As I made my way down the hill towards the house, a pair of headlights crept up the driveway. I was relieved to find out it was Bobby's car and not Hank's truck. I remembered the 2 bags of garbage I left up the hill and the nosy harlot nearby. I hoped he wouldn't run his mouth to her. Bobby had a tendency to divulge a little too much information. They were the kind of things that were supposed to stay family secrets. We had a lot of those. Uncle Hank around? Just love this background. He'll be back for dinner. His flight should be landing soon. I'll be back later. What's for dinner? Chicken and corn. Before you go, I left 2 bags of garbage up the hill. Go get 'em and throw 'em in the dumpster. Fine. Got a cigarette? Yeah, that's 'cause they're mine. Whatever. Fucking worthless piece of shit. Fucking worthless piece of shit. I couldn't blame my sister for offing herself. Who wouldn't with a worthless piece of shit son like that? I was jealous of her. She didn't have to deal with him anymore. He was so entitled. Kids today think the world owes them something. I had been feeding the piece of shit every Sunday for the last 3 years. At least he didn't live with us anymore. Hank almost strangled him to death in his sleep the night before Bobby moved out. I went inside to start dinner. I thought too much as I laid out the chicken fingers on the tray. I thought about the harlot and the worthless piece of shit running into each other. He'd probably ask her out for drinks, or at least to the back seat of his car. I was pulling the lid off a can of corn when the phone rang, and I cut my thumb on the ridges. Maybe that was Hank calling. Hello? Hello. This is the Black Rock Police Department. Is this Mrs. Lupram? Who's asking? Deputy Andrew Briggs, Black Rock PD. Is this Mrs. Daria Lupram, the caretaker of the Stonehill Cemetery? What is this about? Mrs. Lupram, we've received some disturbing and serious complaints as of late from visitors. We'd like to come out tomorrow to have a look around. Tomorrow isn't good. Why is that? There's a funeral here tomorrow. I can't have you guys out here poking your nose around while people are grieving. And I'll be busy. I don't get around easy. I'm ill, you see. Takes a lot out of me to do this. I can still dig a mean hole. What is the name of the deceased? I don't remember at the moment. Paperwork is around here somewhere. I can just check the obituaries. Mrs. Lupram, we'll have to come out another time. We'll be in contact. Have a pleasant evening. Fucking pig. Fucking pig. There ain't nothing to see here but the dead. They aren't complaining. They've never complained to me about anything. At least I managed to stall for more time. Maybe tomorrow I could clean up the rest of the sections. If I found some cash, I could pay Bobby to help out. I'd probably need to have Hank empty the dumpster somewhere. I'd need about $80 for the dumpster and the same amount to pay Bobby. There were more headlights outside. Maybe the fucking harlot was leaving. I heard Bobby throwing the bags into the dumpster. I expected to hear his car door shut and him speed off, but I heard his feet on the front steps before he came inside. What is with all the people visiting graves? Boy, I'll never be able to explain other people's actions to you, so stop asking. Now, you wasn't talking to the fucking harlot up there, was you? Don't worry about what the fuck I was doing. Why, you little. You want to work here tomorrow? I'll pay you $10 an hour. Make it 15. Deal. Now close my door. It's snowing outside. Who are you on the phone with? Don't worry about what the fuck I was doing. You forgot to preheat the oven. I'll be back for dinner. Fucking worthless piece of shit. Fucking worthless piece of shit. Shits, pigs, and harlots were up in my business. Worried about what I was doing in my house on my land. I knew a special place just for shits, pigs, and harlots. Just because it has a cemetery doesn't mean this isn't my private property where I can do what I please. I could shoot these visitors and be well within my rights as long as it was on the front half of their body. I had enough guns for each one of my fingers. I was just running out of space in the ground over the last decade or so. I don't think that's a proper understanding of how this works, but sure, we'll go with it. She probably knows. I turned the oven on and thought about what to tell Hank. I thought more about what not to tell Hank. He was sure to see right through me. He always did. He would get it out of me before he took the first bite of his meal. I needed his help. I needed Bobby's help. I didn't have any money to pay him to haul the dumpster away or to hire a lawyer. I couldn't think of the phrase at the time, but I was quite certain I had broken a couple of laws, and there was a considerable amount of evidence to cover up. I wasn't ready to deal with Hank. I hoped he was tired. I wished he'd sleep in his truck. I needed so many things from him, and I knew he didn't want to do any of them. And if he saw that girl outside, I wouldn't even want to be near him. Fuck. And I knew what to do. I'd offer the girl out there to Hank as a reward. Help me and I'll help you. We both have things out there we can pick up. I thought about the best way to take her down. There was always a good old-fashioned blunt force instrument. I could bring something a little more intimidating, like a machete. I could also trap her right into the house. Bobby could disconnect her fuel line or her battery. She'd come into the door in need of a phone. Yeah, the phone was right down there. It was all so simple. Everyone would win. I just needed Bobby to come back. In the meantime, I worked on the mechanisms of the indoor trap. The basement hadn't been used for some time. I set the 3 padlocks for the basement door, keys inside, on a small shelf. just specifically tucked out of sight when the basement door stood open. That ditzy harlot would likely wander right in, but I still left my club leaned on the table. Hank could use the chair. I'd seen him do it before. I heard Hank's truck before I saw his headlights. I still had 4 minutes left on the timer and no plates on the table. Shit. Fucking worthless piece of shit. Hi, honey. How was Texas? It was Texas. Who the fuck's been going up the road? I don't know. Mourners. Mourners. I saw that look in his eye. The one he got every time. Dinner not ready? It'll just be a minute. A minute? What's wrong with you? Nothing's... Don't give me that bullshit. What have you been doing? I waited for the timer to go off. I prayed for the timer to go off. It didn't go off. Answer me. What the fuck? Hank walked to the door and looked outside. His next move was for a shotgun. Is this thing on? Daria Leprum, come out of the house with your hands in the air. Oh my god. What the hell did you do? Hank, I swear it wasn't my fault. Get the fuck out there. He pointed the gun at me and motioned it towards the door. They obviously ain't here for me. Heh. You say anything about me and I'll kill you. Mrs. Leprum, you're under arrest for the felony charge of interference with a cemetery. You weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow. I'm here now, and you've compiled plenty of evidence for me. Am I going to prison? You sure are. Can you put your hands behind your back? The fucking pigs dumped me handcuffed into the back of the car like a sack of dirty laundry. By the time I managed to sit up, we were already pulling away. I saw Hank let go of the curtain he had peeled back inside the house. I hoped he'd got his dinner. I saw Bobby up the hill, sitting on the hood of his car next to the beautiful redhead. Fucking harlot. Fucking worthless piece of shit. God fucking damn it. I made a vow that they'd pay for what they did to me. Leela Carpenter. Leela Carpenter. Leela Carpenter. Leela Carpenter. Leela Carpenter. Leela fucking Carpenter. So, how do you feel? I don't know. Not much different. I'm glad she's gone. This place needs a lot of work. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to come around here anymore. Sorry you couldn't find your grandfather. Who knows? I may actually have. There's thousands of graves here. There were a lot of remains in those bags. I don't feel that bad, for myself anyway. I feel bad for the people who had real relationships with the dead here. I can't imagine walking to your mother's grave, only to find it's someone else's now. Yeah, I feel that way about my mom. I never really knew her, so I can't really miss her. It hurts a little differently when all the memories are blank. Yeah. Maybe it's a good thing I can't find my grandfather. I should get headed home before it's too dark. Thanks for the joint. I needed that. Yeah, no problem. If you're, if you're ever in town, or I'll just... Never mind. Relax, Bobby. How about I just give you my number? Cool. If you add them all together, it's my favorite number. 17. Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, clearly I've got a little crazy in my blood. It's okay, Bobby. I like crazy. As long as you like games. Oof, this is already... Oof. This reminds me too much of friends I knew back in the day. Spoilers, it didn't work out. Do you want to go do something right now? Not tonight, Bobby. It's been a long day. Yeah, I understand. Good night. Good night, Bobby. The end. So, like I said, it's a very dark game. Probably the darkest. I mean, I would say this is probably the darkest game by Hankworx, and really, what saves it for me is the ending, because it kind of to me it kind of makes it seem like so much of the the darkness or whatever of the story could have been just in the head of this Daria woman. Um, and I think that that tonal shift that happens when we leave her as the narration um, helps sort of cinch it a little bit more as a cohesive story. Um, here through the vision of Daria, I mean, we're not given any description about Bobby or anything like that, but you can already like in your mind when she's talking about it, you can picture almost this like Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing going on of like just these kind of social rejects that have apparent damage to them. And the art definitely suggests it. And then you get to the end, and Bobby and this Leela woman are having a perfectly normal conversation. And, it seems like maybe Bobby's really just kind of a normal guy, other than just having kind of a crappy situation here. So I think that's what really cinched the story for me personally, and kind of drew it out of the really kind of ridiculous darkness that it sort of starts off with and goes into. Like I said, let's see, what did I write here? Originally, chilling story. Moments of it feel too dark and vacant to be real, yet appear lifted from the accompanying news story. This story paints a picture of an amoral landscape as decrepit as the grainy, glitched backgrounds and sticks with it. I personally enjoyed the soundtrack with the sounds fading in and out and giving the whole experience a very dizzying, surreal feel. The sound design was what really drew me in. I left not really knowing if everything was as the narrator described or if she becomes so dim and depressed by how things had turned out that she convinced herself it was all darkness with no light. This story rides the line between a depressing atmosphere and too much to handle to take seriously. It almost goes too far but never quite falls off. So I said that 99 days ago and forgot. Then I play it again and I say pretty much the exact same thing. That's funny how that works sometimes. Yeah, so I feel like the Caretaker is a very solid Hankworx game. I like it, and this is what initially drew me into all this. And so it's kind of cool to cap it off with playing the first one again and feeling like maybe I have a little more of a like appreciation for the elements as they developed. And play if I played Sheila and the Seven Gates, it would probably feel like, oh yeah, I can see all these elements coalescing into what I would call a very particular style. And so I'm always excited to see, there's another Scream Jam coming up, Scream City. And I think Hankworx is at least in the Discord for it. So, who knows? This next one, I'm definitely going to be doing, playthroughs of all the games for that one. And, we'll just have to see. And I'm excited to see because I think that there is a real style that's grown from Jambox and Forklift Simulator. You start to see glimpses of it in CIA Fish Enthusiast List, actually. Then you get to something like Lars, where it's like, okay, Lars is now really feeling like a Hankworx game. What's her name is experimenting on it and maybe showing its colors as like a little more inspired by Cat Lady or whatever. And then you get to Don't Look at Greg, and then like Don't Look at Greg, I can see the jump from Don't Look at Greg to Sheila and the Seven Gates, like immediately, just stylistically. But then you get to Botched, and Botched is like definitely, what I feel like is sort of the opus so far, where all these elements have coalesced into the best written experience and the best like story experience of that balance of dark themes with with enough meat to it that it's not just like, oh my god, like this is just, ooh, we're doing the funeral march here. But you look at Caretaker and you listen to Caretaker, and the visual elements from Caretaker and Lars and what's her name, these all come together, and you get Sheila and the Seven Gates of Hell. Um, and it's like, it just kind of all comes together. And so I'm excited to see, if and when, probably when, not if, but when, Hankworx has another game, I'm excited to see how these elements can mature even more. And I'm excited to see where it goes. So if you watched all these episodes of Hankworx, the Hankworx marathon, super cool. Thank you. But really, come and take a look and play these for yourself, because, there's a couple here I didn't play just because Hankworx kind of told me that it's like a lot of these are just, tests, tech demos, if you will. But it's just, it's just really cool to do a deep dive and see where the artist goes, and like how they start having their signatures, And I definitely think of Hankworx as an artist. Well, everybody who creates creative works is an artist as far as I'm concerned, but you really start seeing a real creative style that's developing out of this. So anyway, this is the final episode for now of the Hankworx marathon. I'm optimistic. I'm excited. I want to see what else comes out of this. And check it out for yourself. Seriously, it's really cool. They're really fun. They're really interesting stories. I mean, especially things like Lars and Botched. Even what's her name, I didn't get the good ending. So, check it out and see for yourself what elements, work for you, what draws you in, and get a conversation started. Let's let's actually treat the people who are creating consistent things here on Itch.io. Let's treat them like they're real, real creative people who are actually creating content, and let's really actually check it out, and let's read into it and treat it like it's a real work and not just, throwaway content, because there's so much work in this that it's unfair to treat it as just throwaway content to just look at and just be like, yeah, okay, and then move on. That's not fair to it. So anyway, my rant is over. Thank you for watching the Hankworx marathon. I don't quite have an idea for what I'm doing next, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So I'm sure I'll come up with something fun. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next one, whatever that may be. Have a good night.